Portal 2 is the game that made me fall in love with machinery. I'm used to depictions of the future as frictionless. Smooth white walls, enormous screens of easily digestible information, a general hand-waving when it comes to the actual technology. The wonders of the future are explained by nanobots and quantum computing. Things too small for us to notice. In Portal 2, the technology refuses to be unnoticeable. Instead of gently glowing screens and smooth outer casings, wires and pistons and bits of metal erupt from every surface. The machinery in this game is never hidden from you. Endlessly jointed robotic arms, doors that slam and spark, grungy wires dripping unknown fluids down your spine. In Portal 2, there is no facade. The machinery is everywhere and everything, and it wants you to know it. It is nothing so much as a show of sheer force, endless steel beams and grinding gears with you caught between their metal teeth. It is up to you to dismantle it from the inside out. Access to machinery is always about control. The smoother, quieter, and less intrusive a machine is, the less control you have over it, and the more control it may, subtly, have over you. Exposed machinery is understandable. We can build it, fix it, bend it, break it. But hidden machinery is much more difficult for us to affect. We must pry back its featureless facade before we start pulling out wires by the handful. To have control over a machine is to access its insides. And we've known this since we started trying to kill them. The spaceship in 2001: A Space Odyssey is the epitome of a technologically beautiful and frictionless future. Gleaming white interiors are accented by colorful lights. Smooth seams and gently curving walls make the place feel alien but welcoming. The trade-off for this pristine future is that the astronauts are not the ones in control. It's the AI, HAL, that is actually determining everyone's fate. HAL controls the airlocks, the sleep chambers, every camera and microphone and computer dotted around the ship. It sees to everything. It sees everything, and the astronauts have no way to stop it. There's no exposed wire to cut, no terminal to input commands into. Everything is filtered through layers and layers of smooth packaging designed to separate the crew from the machine, none of them able to directly control HAL's actions even as it starts killing members of the crew one by one. The only way to stop it is for the last remaining crew member to enter its central processing unit, to put his hands on HAL's circuits directly and pull them out one by one. The facade is perhaps even clearer in the original Portal game. You start out in a pristine white facility, a calm robotic voice speaking to you as you solve puzzles. Sure, it occasionally mentions something unsettling, something about death or dismemberment, a hint at a more sinister underbelly. But what are you going to do? Stop solving puzzles? Sit in one room forever? The seams in these walls are airtight. How do you expect to escape into the mainframe, to access the machine? It's only when the robot itself lowers the facade, trying to explicitly kill you with a pit of fire, that you can escape into the grungy underbelly of the facility. The voice that spoke to you so clearly mere minutes ago now echoes through the rusted hallways. It says it can feel you in there. This is not an area meant for humans. The tables have turned. It is scared. You will tear it apart from the inside out. I respect Portal for showing the facade breaking, for demonstrating how ripping it open can reclaim our control over the machines that control us. I respect Portal 2 for not having a facade. In Portal 2, you are in the guts of the machinery the minute the game starts, and you start f***ing it up immediately. You smash buildings, wander into areas you aren't supposed to go, mess with assembly lines and processing plants, and power up things that should have stayed silent. You have full access, and yet it's still intimidating. In fact, the facility is terrifying in its exposure. The knowledge that even with access to every rivet, your mortal body could never truly kill something as powerful as this. It's not truly controlled by anyone but itself. There's a point at which machinery earns the right to be unafraid, to be disgusting and exposed, and still in control. At least it's honest. At least you can see it working. At least you know what it's doing to you. Luckily, we don't have endless mechanical superstructures in real life. But to reach Portal 2's level of exposure with some more realistic machines, it is first on us to destroy the facade, to demand that the machinery we interact with is honest about what it is and what it's doing, to accept some friction in exchange for control. Unfortunately, the tech industry today appears to be moving in the exact opposite direction, making everything more abstracted and obscure in the name of being user-friendly, which seems to be code for simplifying machines into stupidity, removing everything that might cause a second of friction to the point of sanding away the machine itself. And while a lot of these tech improvements may seem to help you in the moment, make no mistake, you are rescinding your control to billionaires. These tech companies know exactly what they're doing. They know that the more frictionless their machinery, the less control you have over it, and the more control they have over you. So I will start by pointing out the facade, showing different ways it manifests in the real world, instead of in movies or games. Then we will move to where it doesn't exist, and when it's not necessary. And finally, I will argue for tearing the mask off entirely and exposing the guts of our machines to the world, vulnerable or not. Because to allow the gross, messy, raw parts of our machinery to be sanded off and hidden away is to accept the rule of the corporations that build them and to put control of ourselves in the hands of someone else. It makes a lot of sense to start with Apple. After all, I wrote and edited this essay on an Apple laptop, the 15-inch 2023 MacBook Air to be precise. It is, by most accounts, a great computer. It's thin, it's light, the battery lasts forever, and it can run my video editing software without a hiccup. But this laptop unsettles me because of how little it wants me to think about it. It's thin and light enough for me to throw it in my backpack without a second thought. The battery lasts so long I only have to charge it when I sleep, and everything runs without a hitch. There's no friction in using my MacBook. This is a computer with all the rough edges sanded off, to the point where it has become unnoticeable. I forget that it is a machine. And the less I have to actually consider it as a machine, the more I can forget how I spend the majority of my waking hours on it. The more I can ignore the creeping presence it exerts over every part of my life, because it feels natural. The connection is so seamless that the computer is indistinguishable from myself, becoming an extension of my body. It has taken over a part of me without me even realizing. But the few problems I do have with my MacBook are unsolvable, and as I keep running into these invisible walls, it makes me notice just how constrained I really am. There are exactly 2 USB-C ports on it, and those fill up quickly. I end up shelling out for tangles of adapters in a desperate attempt to make my $1,500 machine work for me. There are endless apps and games that won't run on the Apple operating system, locking me out of half the stuff I want to use my computer for in the first place. When my storage fills up, I have no choice but to shift things to external drives, the actual storage of my computer completely inaccessible. And none of these complaints are a big deal, really. I knew what I was getting into when I bought the computer. But it's a weird feeling to have such a capable machine and keep having to work around it or against it. I can't change the computer to fit me, so I must change to fit the computer. My MacBook controls the terms of every interaction I have with it.
This is exactly what Apple wants, end-to-end control. The ability to make every decision at every step for everyone who purchases an Apple computer. They don't trust anyone else with control, ever. This is perhaps easiest to see in their repair policies. Say you're trying to open up your MacBook to fix a simple hardware issue, or just trying to play with the guts of the machinery you spent thousands of dollars on. Despite this being your computer, not Apple's, they will do their very best to keep you out of it.
Your first hurdle is even seeing the bare wires of your computer. The outer shells of Apple devices are held in place with a unique screw, designed to be impossible to open with standard screwdrivers. In fact, using a similar but not identical screwdriver will strip the screw entirely. Other innovations, like riveted keyboards or glued-in batteries and storage, prevent people from repairing or upgrading these parts at all, often leading to replacement of the entire device instead. The interior of every AirPod is filled with industrial-strength adhesive, preventing any repairs. Swapping hardware between devices, even two of these same pieces of hardware from these same Apple devices, is programmed to cause both to break entirely, and Apple has closed workarounds for this problem in the past. Apple has even admitted to using software updates to slow down old phones, forcing people to upgrade even when their device was still in good condition.
These anti-consumer practices only help Apple's bottom line. By making their products unrepairable, consumers are forced to replace devices that could otherwise be reused or recycled, creating millions of tons of electronic waste and billions of dollars in profit. Apple has worked their hardest to ensure self-repair is as difficult, costly, and annoying as possible. The abstraction of their machinery serves to make the individual consumer more dependent and less in control. Look, I'm not gonna pretend to understand how my laptop works. It could fall open before me tomorrow, and I wouldn't know what was what, let alone how to replace a component. But that should be my choice. It should be my choice to take my computer to a third-party repair shop. It should be my choice to upgrade the storage or change out the ports or swap the battery. Before anything else, my computer should be a machine. A machine I can interact with directly, a machine I can control. Apple hides the innards of their devices to keep them elite and inaccessible, locking wiring behind bespoke screws and layers of abstraction, designing frictionless interactions simply to keep me from seeing my computer for what it is, a machine. Their greatest fear is that I will control my own device. To control something you own is to have absolute power over it. You have the ability to modify it, share it, keep it, or destroy it. But when things become digitized, we give up almost all of that power for the convenience of accessing it at the push of a button. I'm talking, of course, about media, shows, movies, games, music. When these become digitized and hidden, moved onto subscriptions instead of on shelves, it's not us, the owners, who hold any power over them. Rather, they're controlled by the companies and streaming services that give them to you, liable to disappear at any moment. But man, they are just so convenient. My Xbox Game Pass subscription kind of rocks.
For $20 a month, I can play hundreds of games on it whenever I want. Downloading a few AAA titles in a row feels like I may as well be robbing Xbox of hundreds of dollars of games. But these games constantly cycle in and out of the service.
I go back to play older downloads sometimes only to be told I don't have the license for it anymore. I can either pay up or abandon my save file. These games are not mine. When streaming shows or movies, the streaming service retains all power over anything you watch.
Services can remove anything at any time, often with little to no warning. Even purchasing something directly does little. Platforms can simply delete your digital movies and shows with no refunds and no promises to ever bring it back. If the company goes out of business or you cancel the service, your purchase is gone for good, your money entirely meaningless.
Through streaming services, we rescind our ownership of everything. This corporate ownership has serious ramifications for what we can do with our purchases. A physical object can be traded, resold, stored, shared, displayed, and illegally copied. It's clear what you're allowed to do with it because it's fundamentally yours. You're holding it. As one librarian says, physical media brings with it a consistent and well-understood set of rights and restrictions. But in the digital age, it's unclear who's allowed to do what with what. One thing is for certain, you don't have nearly as much freedom. Digital rights management, or DRM, applies to media from songs to video games, and entirely prevents the sharing of digital purchases. The thing that you own is now stuck within tight sets of rules, tied to your device or your account, and ultimately still controlled by the company that distributes it. With digital purchases, you can no longer bring a game over to a friend's house to play it together, can't swap movie collections, can't resell things when you're done with them. With DRM, we are individualized, our purchases for us and us alone. The digitization of media abstracts us from the realities of ownership, keeps us from having control over our own belongings, and makes us ever more dependent on the companies we buy from. But there's also an ever-growing amount of media, content, that you could never own physically, and therefore never control. This YouTube video will never be showing in theaters near you, and I'm certainly not making DVDs of it. That means there's a myriad of ways that my videos, and every video on the internet, could simply cease to exist. You don't have control because I could take them down. I don't have control because YouTube could take them down. Or who knows, maybe YouTube as we know it will crumble and delete everything, and I'll have to move to Vimeo. But I think the larger concern about control on YouTube or any social media platform is the algorithm. Essentially everything most people consume on these sites is served to them by a machine, even if we don't think of it that way. The algorithms governing social media, and the whole internet, are abstracted from us by so many layers that we have no control over them, and they have near endless control over us. Algorithms have been shown to increase extremist viewpoints through a process known as algorithmic radicalization. Once someone starts seeing extreme posts, the algorithm will continue to serve them increasingly radical content, reinforcing their extreme perspective further and further. Because of this, algorithms and their polarizing echo chambers have directly led to hate crimes around the world, and in 2017, an ethnic cleansing of Rohingyas in Myanmar, which, according to Amnesty International, was substantially contributed to by Facebook's dangerous algorithms. We do not control these machines, and the few people who could don't care enough to try. As long as you're still watching stuff, these algorithms do not care how false, harmful, or actively dangerous what they're showing you is. They're designed specifically to get rid of any friction so that you can scroll and scroll and scroll and never actually consider what it is you're watching. You've given up your choice of entertainment, your use of your free time, and maybe even your political viewpoints to a machine. And when we're being fed all our media by an algorithm, never making a decision for ourselves, it's only a small step to let that expand into every part of our lives. AI bros have a really depressing vision of the future. They want a frictionless world, a world in which none of us ever have to think about anything.
Reading books is replaced with AI-simplified versions, or just AI-generated summaries. Current events are covered by AI reporters. Art is made by AI artists. School essays are written by ChatGPT instead of students.
In every case where you're supposed to do something and learn something in the process, be it a critical thinking skill, or the ability to make a decision, or just a little more knowledge about yourself, these people would rather let AI take over. Look, I know New York Times opinion pieces are low-hanging fruit, but this guy wants AI to decide what he reads, how he manages his stress, and what city he lives in. Are you even a person anymore if AI is deciding everything for you? Are you yourself? Or are you some chatbot's idea of you, a string of words put together in the most probable order? Oh. Never mind, that makes sense. These people really wish critical thinking skills didn't have to exist, that they didn't have to work at anything. To them, research, writing, reading, learning, and making decisions are things to be polished out of our lives, so we have more time to talk to chatbots, or sit in our little Tesla Nazi cars as we scroll through videos recommended by an algorithm that knows how often I take a shit. Look, there's already studies out there showing that AI decreases critical thinking skills, that it makes human cognition atrophied and unprepared. When we remove every bit of friction from our lives and give ultimate control of ourselves to a machine for the sake of convenience, we become empty shells. My favorite quote about this is from David Roth at Defector. When visiting the Consumer Electronics Show this year, he was sold 1,000 visions of the future. Not things like universal healthcare or economic reform, but blank, white, featureless worlds. Worlds with no rough edges and no decisions. He says,
"This is the rich buffing all human friction from every aspect of their days so that they can more cleanly and passively move through them, a circuit of Teslas circling silently underground forever. The fantasy and utility of AI for the unconscionably wealthy and relentlessly wary masters of this space converge in a high and lonesome abstraction. Technology designed less to do every human thing for you than to replace all those human things with itself and then sell that function back to you as a monthly subscription."
AI is machinery at its most removed from us. When interacting with the sleek websites of these chatbots, we don't ever have to consider the miles of circuitry that underlie them, the data centers that consume enough electricity to power a small country, the billions of gallons of water given to AI instead of people, the dramatically underpaid and mistreated workers labeling data for pennies an hour. It appears as a web page like any other, a pixel thick, unbelievably smooth, impossible to touch. At this level of abstraction, is it any wonder even its own creators can't control it? It's shockingly easy to find guides on how to sidestep ChatGPT's content moderation, allowing it to generate anything from hate speech to instructions on building a bomb. This is the future. A machine that doesn't appear as a machine at all, something so far away that we have no control over it, and it has all the control over us. We cannot tell it what to do, cannot change it to suit ourselves. It will always be an incomprehensible black box, something with ever-increasing power over our lives that no one, not us, not its creators, not anyone on the planet, can actually directly control. And that's exactly what they want. The power these machines have over us is, of course, not actually the power of the machine itself. There's no real conscious thought in an algorithm or an AI chatbot. They are instead being wielded by companies, or more accurately, wielded by the people at the tops of these companies. These machines are here to increase profits and decrease critical thinking, to ease the ascent and continued rule of the people already at the top, to allow them to keep us complacent. Once men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free, but that only permitted other men with machines to enslave them. The control these machines exercise is the control of the corporation, of the ultra-wealthy, of the ruling class, subtly and indirectly controlling everyone else through increasingly abstracted machinery until the world becomes the frictionless utopia they dream of. But I like to believe that our world will never be frictionless, that there will always be something anti-establishment, something gross and weird that challenges the blank white future we're being sold by billionaires, a piece of machinery that doesn't lie about what it is, machinery that is brutal and honest and real. There are few things in our everyday lives that are unapologetically mechanical. Think of the last time you saw a gear, heard a metal-on-metal screech, touched rust dripping down the side of something larger than life. That's because, in most of our lives, we interact with machines only as consumers. And it's when we're consumers that it's the most important for the machinery to be hidden. Both so the companies can exercise their control over us without us noticing, but also because it looks nicer. Nobody wants to buy a car with exposed metal or rust or oil stains. We'd much rather it be smoothed out, user-friendly. It's only when the people using machines are not the consumers that their innards become exposed. The millionaires that purchase construction equipment are never going to touch their bare wiring.
They don't care if it's gross, and it doesn't matter if the workers care. They're there for a paycheck, not to marvel at shiny cranes. Dust and scrapes cover these machines because they exist to be functional instead of beautiful. Their innards are exposed so they're as easy to access and service as possible, so that the workers can understand each movement of these enormous beasts.
This is true user-friendliness, the way machines are the most useful to the people using them. But we never think of it that way. We just see them as gross, unpolished. At least it's honest. You know the excavator isn't subtly controlling the way you think, feel, or act. It's just there, completely visible, in all its beat-up, bare metal glory. If you're from Europe or Asia, the large machines you interact with most frequently might be trains. The dichotomy between the consumer machine and the utility machine is obvious in the differences between passenger and freight rail.
Passenger rail has to attract customers. The trains are beautiful, with stunning paint schemes, wide windows, and bright headlights. They feel modern and sleek, shiny paneling covering the oil dripping from their undersides. Despite being one of the most obvious large machines people touch on a daily basis, these trains want you to forget their machinery, to not be intimidated by them, to not realize just how powerful they truly are. Freight trains don't even pretend. They scream along the tracks covered in dirt and graffiti, disgusting compared to their passenger-carrying cousins. There's nothing sleek about them, handles and pipes and antennae flying off them in every direction.
No one buys a ticket on a freight train. They don't need to play nice. But no machine wants you to forget about its mechanics more than an airplane.
When walking around an airport, you see nothing but polished white fuselages, rows of gleaming planes looking like they just rolled off the manufacturing line. Even the cargo planes are beautiful, with bright paint jobs glowing in the sun. Planes, more than any other form of transport, have to seem trustworthy, modern, clean. They hide their machinery from you to keep you from thinking about the amazing contradiction that is flight. To keep you from realizing just how much of a miracle every airplane is. But even more than they want you to forget their machinery, planes are designed to keep the air itself from realizing they're flying. Unlike a crane or a train, there can't be exposed openings or rough edges. Nearly every protrusion from a plane is designed to provide some aerodynamic benefit. Except for that. That's the Wi-Fi. But other than that, down to the last rivet, planes are smooth and polished and lightweight. They're designed to be beautiful, to not remind you or the air they fly through of the machinery their fuselage conceals.
But it's there, lurking, just underneath the exterior, the bare mechanics of the plane itself.
This is a photo I took of the wheel well of a Boeing 737. Mere feet from the passengers in the brightly lit cabin, inches from the air looking to catch on any protrusion, exposed wiring and pipes weave in and out of each other in a metallic dance, the grime just barely concealed from the real world. This, to me, is more beautiful than any livery, more stunning than any wing design.
Standing in the wheel well, surrounded by exposed metal, the light just barely reaching to the dark corners. I am in control, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like being part of another world, a world in which I am insignificant, a world ruled by machines. Certain planes want to remind you that that world exists. They are built to be intimidating. While bare machinery is more controllable, as Portal 2 shows us, it can feel so much scarier, a reminder of how fragile your fleshy body is compared to titanium-welded joints.
Certain planes want you to feel that mortality. Gray on gray, seams caked with grime, exhaust trails streaked across their sides, bristling with weaponry. Military aircraft want you to be scared. They are functional to the point of intimidation, every rivet designed to remind you of the raw power these planes wield. Their mechanics are bared wherever aerodynamics allows it, the breathtaking sweep of their wings grimy and disgusting, caked with the dirt of faraway places they never should have been, stories you don't want to hear.
What is the point of pretty paint when it will be covered in blood and ash? These planes serve to remind you who is in control, who holds the power. Their bare machinery makes them controllable, but only by the people allowed to access them in the first place. You will never get close enough to touch it. And their power is absolute. Under perfect control of the pilot, of the military, they annihilate whatever they're pointed at as easily as breathing. Whoever controls this machine controls you. Armored Core 6 is a game about machinery. Armored Core 6 is a game about war.
Never have I played a game in which the machinery I control feels so present within the world. Each step my mech takes slams into the ground, kicking up dust and splintering trees. Each missile launch and machine gun fire recoils my mech, the flesh and blood me sitting on my couch in the dark, leaning into every shot, trying to offset their impact. The sparks that fly from my tank treads, the moment of pause before I kick off the ground, the jets and thrusters that minutely control my mid-air trajectory, it is all there before me, hundreds of tons of metal and oil and joints and sockets screeching in harmony as I drive a hunk of titanium through another mech's skull. Armored Core 6 has nothing to hide. Your mech bristles with machinery designed to kill other people in the most efficient way possible. Levels often start with pilots rallying to fight you, often end with you hunting them down as they flee. You are here to do a dirty job. There's no point in polishing your death machine. This is machinery at its most brutal, everything exposed, everything terrifying, everything under your control. Your mech is, first and foremost and always, a machine you can interact with directly, swapping everything from the legs to the rockets to the generator to the FCS. If you need to fly longer, you can change your thrusters. If your weapons are inaccurate, you can swap your aiming system. If your enemies are too quick, you can make your mech 3 times as light and 4 times as fast, and you can do the same in the opposite direction to take every shot without flinching. There are guns and plasma swords and 9 types of missiles, a weapon for every possible occasion. Armored Core 6 is a game about having precise control over your killing machine. It can be exactly what you want it to be, with the exact right weapons and handling and energy management to respond to your every whim. The rivets aren't hidden because you need to access them, to change yourself into the machine you want to be. And the machine you become is a terrifying show of force, outclassing every other enemy absolutely, a perfect war machine under perfect control, wielded to control everything around it as well.
In perhaps my favorite short story ever, the main character is an attack helicopter. That's not quite right. The main character has the body of a human, but their gender is attack helicopter. They have undergone tactical role gender reassignment to make them a better military pilot. In this vision of the future, the army has weaponized the construction of gender, taking the way people intuitively understand it and remapping their brains to connect instead with wiring and mechanics. As the main character, call sign Barb, not short for Barbara, says, if gender has always been a construct, then why not construct new ones? It is a more intimate relationship with a machine than anything I've talked about so far. I remember being a woman. I remember it the way you remember that old beloved hobby you left behind.
I was always aware of being small, aware that people could hurt me. Now I think about being small as an advantage for nape of Earth maneuvers and pop-up guided missile attacks. Now I yield to speedwalkers in the hall like I need to avoid fouling my rotors. Now walking beneath high-tension power lines makes me feel the way that a cis man would feel if he strutted down the street in a miniskirt and heels.
It's not just the machinery of the helicopter that has spread to Barb, but the actions, the feelings, the lived reality of being a helicopter. Grimy pistons replacing their muscles in their mind, if not in reality. To Barb, this transition was about control. They speak at length about how they used to try and be good at being a woman, laughing the right way, walking the right way, giving the right gifts. They were obsessed with controlling their body, controlling how other people saw them, controlling themselves. When I was a woman, I wanted to machine myself.
I loved my birth control, loved that I could turn my period off, loved the home beauty feedback kits that told you what to eat and dose to adjust your scent, your skin, your moods. I admired women who talked about their implants the same way they talked about computers, phones, tools, technologies of access, technologies of self-expression.
For what is the body but another type of machine, a biological one that has become ever more accessible with new technologies and medications and procedures, a place of merciless self-possession and self-modification. Today, more than ever, we control our bodies. This is how I control mine. Hi. I'm transgender. I haven't brought it up before because it hasn't seemed relevant. My gender feels much less important than my love of Hollow Knight or Disco Elysium. Oh, actually everyone could probably tell I was trans when I made a Disco Elysium video essay, couldn't they? Maybe this is why I'm so obsessed with machinery, with being able to control things, alter them exactly the way I want to. My body isn't the one that I want. And testosterone isn't perfect. The good changes come with things I don't like, things that alienate me from my body in new ways. I don't know if I'll ever have a body that's entirely mine, if I'll ever have perfect control over what I am. But in a machinic fantasy, I can. When I play Armored Core 6, I know exactly what I am. I have control over every nut and bolt and rivet. I can mold my body however I wish, replacing my too wide hips with delicate reverse-jointed legs weighing hundreds of tons, augmenting my skinny arms with assault rifles, building out my shoulders with missile launchers, turning entire neural systems on and off with a flick of my wrist. As a machine, I am physically and mentally perfectly aligned. Barb's transition finally gave them the complete control over their body they had been searching for, the opportunity to be themselves in every shaft and piston and step they took. When you look at yourself, whose eyes do you use? Your own? I am always in myself. I measure my weapons by their effect, not by their similarity to some idea of how I should be. Barb is never more comfortable than in the cockpit, a perfect loop of machinery and pilot, two beings becoming exactly what they want. It's no mistake that the enemy Barb is fighting in this story are black box AIs governing most of the southern United States. Barb says,
"We have no idea how they work, what they think. The AIs could not be modified by humans, thus could not join with America's own governing algorithms, thus must be forced to yield all their control. The AI's citizens cannot question the machine's decisions. Everything the machines do is connected in ways no human can comprehend."
this is a future in which every decision has been given up to an amorphous, abstract machine that no one can control, a vast and incomprehensible power. Barb stands as the counterpoint, someone bare and honest and understandable, someone there. Through machinery, they have achieved control over themselves. But beyond being a fantasy of perfect control, this story is a fantasy of being unafraid. It is unapologetically disgusting, both mechanically and on the flesh side. Barb describes everything from blowing up an empty school to their fetishes, and why these are more closely linked than you might hope. The story is meant to unsettle you, to make you wince. As Barb says, "Do these last details bother you? I like that. I like to intrude, inflict damage, withdraw." But nobody challenges Barb, tells them to shut up and sit down and be palatable to the rest of humanity. Barb knows how to kill the way you know how to hold your elbows when you gesture, an instinctual understanding weaponized into a power you don't want to be on the wrong side of. This wasn't always the case. When they were a woman, they were scared of their surroundings. They didn't have control over the people around them. They didn't feel safe to be themselves. They say, "When I was a woman, I was always aware of surveillance, the threat of eyes on me, the chance that I would cross over some threshold of detection and become a target. Now I do the exact same thing, but I am counting radars and lidars and pit viper thermal sensors, waiting for a missile. No one stalks an attack helicopter." In becoming a helicopter, Barb has forcibly seized control of their surroundings, the threat of their 30mm chain gun enough to silence the predators. People want me on their team, they want what I can do. Barb is unafraid. Ultra-powerful machinery demands respect. Anyone telling a mech to be quiet or discreet would be stepped on before the words ever left their mouth. These machines are reclaiming their right to be obtrusive, to be full of friction and rough edges, to not conform to everyone else's ideas of what they should be. In being unapologetic, they are claiming the ultimate control over themselves, their pilots saying, "My identity is more important than your comfort." Nobody tells a mech to be user-friendly. I wasn't entirely honest with you before. Transgender isn't my whole story. I have a very complicated relationship with my gender. I'm not very open about it because, despite my best efforts, I don't actually have the ability to pilot guided missiles into transphobes' faces. I don't have the power of a mech or an attack helicopter or a military jet. And yet, if I shut up and stay quiet, I am letting other people dictate what I can and cannot be. To make myself user-friendly for them is to sand off the things that make me, me. To have control over myself, how I look, how I act, what I am. I must expose my machinery, make myself vulnerable so that I can access my innards to build myself into whatever I want to become. And in this current terrifying political climate, where Trump is declaring me and every other trans person illegal, trying to shove us back into the shadows, trying his best to make us shut the fuck up, maybe the strongest thing I can do is be unapologetically myself. To refuse to be smoothed out and hidden away, abstracted or digitized or frictionless. Because frictionless is exactly how those people want me, so they can get rid of me and every other trans person without us putting up a fight. Because when machines, or people, are unnoticeable, we no longer have control. Hi, I'm non-binary, meaning I don't identify as a man or a woman. The best way I've found to describe my identity is agender, meaning I don't really feel like I have a gender, or at the very least, I find the normative concept of gender boring and unimportant. My pronouns are they, them, and also he, him, which for me means you can use either or both. I've experimented with other pronouns in the past, and I probably will again in the future. I get gender envy from, that is, want to be perceived like, some guys, sure, but also velociraptors, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, every dragon to ever exist, the Boeing 767, the TGV from the 80s, and Portal 2's superstructure. You may be able to see why I made this video now. My concept of my gender is weird and mechanical. My ideal body, one I can perfectly control. Or a dragon. Being a dragon would work too. But even with the dragon, there's that second fantasy of being unafraid, of having the power to simply exist, obtrusive and loud and unable to be challenged. To not have to worry about my health care or my legal status, to know the people around me will respect who I am, to know that tomorrow I will still be allowed to exist. That's what I get out of stories like Barb's and games like Armored Core 6. Both the intense control over the form I take and the power to enforce it. To make machines, to make ourselves user-friendly, is to rescind control of our lives to billionaires and hateful politicians, to agree that convenience is worth our self-expression. Our computers become inaccessible and unrepairable, our movies and games never actually owned by us, our decisions and identity given away to black box AIs that only want to make us more palatable and controlled. Your devices, your media, your decisions, your body is not your own. When I look at the machines I interact with every day, I can't help but wish for the beautifully unrestrained world of Portal 2, that realm of endless, chaotic machinery. The machines in Portal 2 are complex and strange and unnerving, but they're honest. They are there in front of you, brutal and beautiful in their bare mechanics. Exposed machinery is about control. Control over our media, control over our lives, control over ourselves. The more abstracted machines become, the less control we each have. We cannot allow the gross, chaotic, weird parts of our world to be sanded away by corporations only looking out for their bottom line, by politicians only fueled by hatred, by people that only want you to shut up. To dare to be obtrusive, inconvenient, and rough around the edges is how we reclaim control over our machines and our lives. Do not smooth yourself away for other people's comfort. Be raw, be unafraid, and be there. Now I am jointed inside. Now I am geared and shafted. I am a being of opposing torques.
I am most comfortable in moonless dark, in low places between hills. I am always thirsty and always tense. I tense my core and pace my breath even when coiled up in a briefing chair, as if my tail rotor must cancel the spin of the main blades and the turbines must whirl and the plates flex against the pitch links or I will go down spinning to my death. An airplane wants in its very body to stay flying. A helicopter is propelled by its interior near disaster.